Everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We often hear from listeners who are looking for ways to support loved ones after a TBI, and one area that comes up constantly is this whole emotional well-being piece.
And it's so understandable. It's such a huge part of the recovery process, and it can be so hard to know how to help.
Exactly, because it's not like you can just slap on a Band-Aid on a brain injury, right?
Right. And we often hear emotional regulation as this vague idea, but after TBI, it's not vague at all. It's directly tied to the brain's recovery. Think about those moments after, like you bump your head really hard,
Oh, yeah.
dizzy, can't think straight. Now imagine that on a much deeper level. TBI can disrupt the finely tuned circuits in the brain, especially those areas responsible for controlling impulses, processing language,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and managing our emotions.
So it's like their emotional control panel has been thrown out of whack.
Exactly. And for someone used to expressing themselves easily, suddenly they're struggling to find the right words, or they're bursting into tears unexpectedly. Like one source I read described it as having a radio stuck between stations, all this static and interference where there used to be clear communication.
Ooh, that is a really good analogy.
It's incredibly frustrating, both for the individual and for those around them.
Yeah. And I can see how quickly that frustration, like you were saying, could turn into anger or even despair if someone feels like they're just not being heard or understood.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because of the areas of the brain most commonly affected, we often see a spike in very specific emotions. Anger, frustration, anxiety. This isn't just about feeling sad. It's about feeling like you've lost control, which is a very primal fear.
Yeah. Okay, so empathy is obviously crucial here, right? Knowing that it's not intentional. This is like their brain trying to heal. But how do we show that empathy? Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it begins with creating a safe space.
Okay.
And I know that sounds almost cliche,
Yeah.
right? But it's so much more than just saying, I'm here for you.
Right.
It's about those subtle cues, you know?
Yeah.
The way you react in those moments when they're struggling to even articulate how they're feeling.
Uh-huh.
Even the words you choose.
It's like you're consciously crafting this environment where it's okay to be vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the sources that we dug into had this incredible phrase that really stuck with me, and it's okay to not be okay, especially right now.
Oh, wow.
Think about what that communicates.
Yeah.
It acknowledges the struggle,
Right.
right? It gives permission for them to be honest about how tough things are.
Yeah.
And it subtly reinforces that this is temporary.
Right.
It's not a permanent state.
Yeah, it validates their experience without minimizing it, right?
Exactly.
It's not just brushing off their feelings with you'll get through this.
Right.
It's meeting them right where they are.
And that's what's so crucial, because one of the biggest hurdles for people after TBI is this feeling of being misunderstood or judged,
Yeah.
even unintentionally.
Right.
And judgment, even a well-intentioned "don't worry so much,"
Yeah.
can just shut down communication completely.
Totally. It's like that old saying, people might not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And in this case, we want them to feel safe, heard, and understood.
Precisely. And that leads us to another critical aspect of creating that safe space, avoiding any language that suggests they need to be fixed.
Okay.
So instead of saying, "Have you tried meditating to control your anger?" which implies that their anger is a problem to be solved,
Right.
you could say something like, "Those outbursts must be so frustrating.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to help you feel more grounded in those moments?"
That's such a subtle shift, but it makes all the difference because it's not about taking away their feelings. It's about acknowledging them and then offering support.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes those golden phrases so effective.
Yeah.
They're not about offering solutions.
Right.
They're about offering empathy and understanding.
So we've established this safe space, which
Yes.
is huge.
Absolutely.
But then there's the actual work of helping them process and express those emotions, right?
Yes.
And one thing that stood out from our sources is this importance of going beyond those basic labels like happy, sad, angry.
That's right. Because after TBI, the emotional landscape can be much more complex.
Right.
Imagine feeling a mix of frustration and fear and sadness all at once.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to unpack that?
It's like trying to describe a color you've never seen before.
Exactly. And this is where the listener can become a guide,
Okay.
helping them to explore those nuanced emotions with curiosity and compassion.
Uh-huh.
One source we looked at actually suggested using a feelings wheel.
Okay.
which, if you're not familiar, it basically visually represents a whole spectrum of emotion
Oh,
as a
cool.
tool for conversation.
I love that. It's a way to say, hey, your feelings are valid.
Yeah.
And it might be more complicated than just sad or angry. And that's okay.
Uh-huh.
Let's explore this together.
I love that because it takes the pressure off of them to have all the answers right.
Exactly.
It creates that space for discovery. It's
Yeah.
like you're giving them a map to navigate their own inner world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes even finding the right words to express those complex emotions can be a challenge in itself.
Oh, totally. So how do we help bridge that gap? Because it's one thing to identify a feeling, but it's another thing entirely to communicate it effectively.
That's where modeling comes in.
Okay.
One of the sources we explored really emphasized the importance of sharing our own emotional experiences,
Okay.
not to hijack the conversation
Right.
or make it about us, but to normalize the act of expressing emotions openly and authentically.
So it's not about saying, oh, I know exactly how you feel, but more like, hey, I struggle with these things too, and here's how I try to handle it.
Precisely. And it's not about pretending to have it all figured out either.
Right.
In fact, modeling vulnerability, admitting when we're feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or unsure,
Yeah.
can be incredibly powerful.
Uh-huh.
It shows them that it's okay to not be okay, and that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
So we're modeling vulnerability. We're providing that safe space for expression. We're helping them explore those nuanced emotions. It sounds like we're creating this foundation for them to rebuild their emotional vocabulary and regain a sense of control.
Exactly. And that sense of control is crucial because it feeds directly into their motivation and their belief in their own ability to recover.
Right.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss.
And that is, so we're modeling vulnerability. We're providing that safe space for expression. We're helping them explore those nuanced emotions. It sounds like we're creating this foundation for them to rebuild their emotional vocabulary and regain a sense of control.
Exactly. And that sense of control is crucial because it feeds directly into their motivation and their belief in their own ability to recover.
Uh.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss, and it's something that often gets overlooked: celebrating the wins.
Oh, celebrating the wins.
Yeah.
Because it is so easy to get caught up in everything that's hard.
Yes.
All the things that have changed. It's like you're focused on all the missing puzzle pieces instead of like the picture that you're building.
Exactly. And that's where celebrating the wins becomes so crucial. It's about recognizing and acknowledging their efforts, even the smallest steps forward, because those small victories are huge motivators, especially when you're in the thick of recovery like that.
So how do we do that effectively then? What does that look like in practice?
Well, I think it starts with paying attention. Did they manage to express their frustration calmly instead of having an outburst?
Okay.
That's huge.
Right.
Did they try to use that feeling wheel we talked about to identify a more nuanced emotion?
Okay.
That's worth celebrating. It's not about showering them with praise for every little thing.
Right.
It's about noticing and acknowledging their efforts to reconnect with themselves and with others.
So it's about being specific and genuine in our responses as well.
Yeah.
So instead of just saying, good job, we could say something like, I know it took a lot of courage to tell me how you were feeling, and I'm really proud of you for opening up.
Exactly. And you can even take it a step further by connecting their effort to the bigger picture.
Okay.
So instead of just saying, I'm glad you told me you were feeling angry,
Yeah.
you could say, I know it was hard for you to tell me you're feeling angry, but I really appreciate you trusting me enough to share that.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me that we can be honest with each other.
Wow. That is so much more powerful than just like a pat on the back, right?
Right.
Because it shows that you see their effort, you value their vulnerability, and you're in it with them for the long haul.
Exactly. And that kind of reinforcement can make all the difference in their recovery journey. Because it's not just about regaining their emotional footing.
It's about rebuilding connections, strengthening relationships, rediscovering their own resilience.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from understanding the neurological underpinnings of emotional expression after TBI to practical tips on creating that safe space, using specific language modeling, healthy expression, and then celebrating even the smallest victories.
Absolutely.
And to our listener, we hope that this deep dive has given you some valuable tools and insights to support your loved one on their road to recovery. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are incredible resources available, and by educating yourself and approaching this challenge with empathy and compassion, you can make a world of difference. Until next time, thanks for diving in with us.